Imagine my concern and confusion last night when it became clear that the Labour Party have now decided that actually they'd quite like to have a second referendum, even though Jeremy Corbyn has said that he doesn't really want a second referendum, even though many people in the Labour Party have said they don't want a second referendum, despite the fact that they will not be able to get a second referendum because there aren't enough votes in Parliament to get it through. They're going to go for it anyway. So basically the Labour Party are promising something they can't deliver. The Tories, in the meantime, are saying we are going to take no deal off the table, which is something they can't do either. So we are now in a sort of situation which is like a double negative stalemate, it seems to me. And I don't know where to go to get the answers, right? So I want to hear from you, first of all, 0344 499 1000. And also, I'm now going to talk to the master of spin himself, Mr. Alistair Campbell, former Chief of Communications for Tony Blair, because I don't think even he could spin his way out of this one. Mr. Campbell, a very good morning to you.
How are you, Mike? You're obviously a bit discombobulated.
Well, I really am. I mean, I've been very calm about all of this. I've been very positive about it. You've seen me down in the tent of shame in Westminster, and I've talked about how we really just need to get on with it. But I've now reached a point of kind of, I don't know what to describe it as. It's a sort of zero-sum stalemate negative. I can't think of anything good to say.
Well, the reason for that is because as we get closer to March 29th, it's becoming absolutely clear or as clear as anything can be in these circumstances, that there's no way of doing this that isn't going to be very, very damaging and very, very worrying. So when you say, and, I've heard you say it before, I've heard your colleague Julia Hartley-Brewer endlessly saying we've just got to get on with it, it has to mean something. It has to be systems that don't plunge the country into chaos. And so I think what you're seeing in both of the main parties, yes, I understand why people can, find it confusing that every day there's another turn, another twist. It's because the MPs are trying to make sense of what the public voted for in June 2016.
But don't you think they're complicating it, though? They're overcomplicating it, aren't they?
Say again?
Aren't they overcomplicating it? It's their fault that it's become so complicated, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is their fault. I think it's the reality of what Brexit is. Look, what's become apparent is that the Brexit that was promised by Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage and all that lot is not deliverable. And the Brexit that Theresa May is trying to negotiate is not popular with either side. And therefore, you have a situation where the MPs, let's be frank, this is a tension that is caused by the conflict, if you like, between what we are, which is a parliamentary representative democracy where we elect MPs to make decisions, and a plebiscite, a referendum, where one of the biggest decisions this country ever takes is handed over to the people in the way that David Cameron did it. But then the MPs do have to then turn that into treaties with other countries that we're leaving. And what you've seen is Theresa May trying her best to do that, failing pretty miserably all round. But it's not just about the fact that she's a very bad negotiator. It's the fact that what she's discovered is there's no way of doing this that isn't damaging Britain. And therefore,
well, I would just take issue with that last statement of yours, Alistair. There is no way of doing this without damaging somebody in Parliament, is where we are, because at the end of the day, we have a whole number, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of MPs who are all working for something other than the good of the country. They're all saying they're working for the good of the country, but they're actually all working for their own little secret agendas. We've got these TIG.
That's an easy thing to say, but I don't.
Well, but it's true though.
It's not true. An MP is subject to all sorts of pressures and all sorts of constraints. So you've seen, for example, there's Jeremy Corbyn. On the one hand, he wants to, if you like, deliver on what the people voted for. On the other hand, he doesn't want to lead the party in a direction that damages either the country or the party. There's a danger that...
Yeah, but you can't do both, can you?
No, exactly. So you have to make decisions. And what you're saying is that you're angry and you're confused and discombobulated because the MPs aren't just doing what you want them to do. The reason
it's not what I want them to do, it's what they were asked to do by the people who voted in the referendum.
No, they voted in the referendum for us to leave the European Union, right, and they are trying to make sense of that in a way that doesn't damage the country.
But you know as well as I do, Alistair, there are people in Parliament who are doing their level best to make sure this does not happen. You can't deny that.
There are people in Parliament who are actually on. There are some people in Parliament who've been clear from the word go. They think this is a disaster. They don't think it should happen. As it happens, that happens to be my view. There are other people in Parliament, many of them in the government, who voted Remain, but actually are trying their hardest to make it happen. So it's not fair simply to say that all these MPs are out for themselves. They, in the end, we are a parliamentary democracy. They have to make some pretty big decisions coming down the track. And I've always said the reason why I felt we'd always possibly end up in the kind of mess that we're in now is because it is a very, very, very big thing for an MP, in my view, let alone a Prime Minister, to take the country in a direction, to vote for things in Parliament that in their gut they know are going to damage this country. And that's the truth about what we're doing.
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think the problem we're facing here, Alistair, is that there are people, and you haven't denied it, so I'll assume that you've agreed, that there are some people, I'm not saying everyone in Parliament is out for themselves, what I'm saying is there is undoubtedly a group of MPs in Parliament who don't want this to happen, and they will do their absolute level best. People like Dominic Grieve. I'm not having a go at the Labour Party. I'm saying people like Dominic Grieve are included. Go on.
Let me just challenge that idea that they're out for themselves. If that suggests there's some kind of, corrupt, hidden agenda.
No, that's not what I said. I said they don't want this to happen.
But listen, Dominic Grieve, you mentioned Dominic Grieve. Okay, he's a Tory MP. He's been elected as a Tory.
Yeah.
But I think when you see Dominic Grieve stand up based on his knowledge of the law, based on his knowledge and his assessment of what he has seen and what Brexit means, I think an awful lot of people actually have considerable respect for somebody for whom the easy thing would be to say, do you know what, I'll keep my head down, I'll just get behind Theresa May. Theresa May's deal is not a good deal for Britain. You and I probably agree on that. So when you're saying let's get on with it, do you mean get on with her deal?
Well, what I've said in the past,
with no deal?
What I've said in the past, and I know that you're an avid listener to this show, so I'm probably telling you something you already know, right? But what I've always said, right, is that, yeah, of course there is no such thing as a perfect deal. Part of the problem here is that we've got too many people who are trained lawyers who are doing what lawyers do, which is nitpicking around the actual facts of the matter. Yes, they are, Alistair, and they're trying to make it impossible to get the deal done. And every time any deal is put together, as you well know, there are parts of it that are not great. There are lots of parts of Theresa May's deal that are not great, but it is the deal that we have. And so sometimes you have to do the deal.
Right. So that's a very, very fair observation. However, I think you should stop pretending these MPs are just there sort of nitpicking. They're doing their job. They've got to look at the detail. The millions and millions of people who took part in the referendum, we can all follow the debate, but the MPs actually is their job to look at the detail and to make judgments about
I get that. I get that.
And that I think is what they're doing. And I think, this it goes back to the point you made earlier. This is what happens when you have this conflict. And it's why David Cameron, I don't know where he is and what he's doing today, but ultimately, this is what has happened as a result of there being, if you like, Parliament. Yes, most parliamentarians were in favour of Remain. They've been instructed to do something. I think they're trying their best. My criticism, for example, of Jeremy Corbyn has been, and I've said this to you many, many times before, and I can't pretend I listen to your programme all the time, but I do listen to it when I'm on it. And I've said to you many times, my worry with the Labour Party is actually that Jeremy Corbyn's not been standing up for what that Labour people want, Labour members, Labour MPs, most Labour supporters. So this is what I mean about the conflicts in a democracy. And the other point I'd make is this is where leadership is so important.
And there is no leadership. That's part of the problem.
Okay, right, but we have the leaders that we have. So you mentioned about, there's always going to be this argument against and that argument against. If I go back to something like, something really difficult and really complicated like the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement, that was difficult. There are still people today who will have an argument, but leaders have to take friend and enemy with them.
Yeah, but you're not going to tell me, right, that there were parts of that agreement that people didn't agree about. There were loads of parts of the Good Friday Agreement that many people thought were wrong, but the agreement was the most important thing. And similarly, that's what should be the case here. And at the moment, the MPs that are dealing with it are not of that mind. What they're doing is complicating it, putting obstacles in the way. And if they'd been in charge of the Good Friday Agreement, you'd still be talking about it now. Nobody would have signed anything.
No, because I'll tell you what happened with the Good Friday Agreement is that the negotiations were done, legislation was passed, but it was then put to a referendum where people could say yay or nay one way or the other. And you cannot pretend to me that the deal that Theresa May is putting forward is what the Brexiteers promised at the referendum. You can't either tell me that the Brexit that was promised by Johnson and Fox and Davis and all the kind of ultras, you cannot tell me that that is deliverable, given what we know about the way these negotiations...
Well, as people like you always say, Alistair, democracy is a movable feast. You don't always get what you were promised. I don't remember any election in which I got what I was promised. What I can also tell you is that an awful lot of MPs who are currently fighting this promised that they would honour the result of the referendum no matter what it was, and they ain't doing that.
No, wait a minute. This is what you've got... Listen, Mike, you've got to be honest about the detail.
I am being honest.
No, you're not, because you just said they all said that they said they would honour the result of the referendum, whatever the consequences.
No, whatever the listen to what I'm saying. Don't make words up. I said whatever the result, not the consequences.
I beg your pardon. Okay, whatever the result. Fair enough. That is what they said. But people are saying this morning about Labour's manifesto. Labour said they would honour, they'd respect the result of the referendum. That's true. However, they also said that they would not support it if it was wrapped around Theresa May's red lines. But to be fair to them, they've been very, very consistent about that. So
if only they had been consistent about something, that would be great. But why have they even bothered to say that they now want to do what you want everyone to do, which is have another referendum, even though they know they can't get it through Parliament? It's a waste of time. It's blowing smoke up everybody's backside, and it means nothing.
No, I don't agree with that, because if
it ain't going to happen, is it?
Well, it might.
No.
Look, we're in a state of total flux at the moment.
Yeah.
We're coming up to March the 29th. When we started the People's Vote campaign a year or so ago, whenever it was, I can't remember when it was.
It's got a bit quiet lately, that, isn't it?
Well, hold on a minute. We're talking about it now because it's bang slap in the middle of the agenda.
Yeah, but everyone's saying it's not going to happen.
No, you're saying it's not going to happen.
No, I'm not the only one saying it.
Wait a minute, and I would agree with you that, for example, the reason why it wasn't put to a vote a couple of weeks ago was because it was obvious it was not going to win. I have always felt that once people face up to all of the choices of whatever Brexit is going to mean, being either so far removed from what was promised that it's undemocratic not to put it to a further test, or undeliverable, then I think there is a very fair chance that Parliament decides, do you know what, we've not been able to resolve this, we're going to put it back to the people. And yes, I think if that was to be voted on today, I suspect it wouldn't win. But just look at how fast things are changing on this. And so I think...
But I don't think anything's changing. There's a lot of wheels spinning, but we're not actually going anywhere. That's my problem. And the reason for that is that Donald Tusk and his mates in Brussels know very well, because they can keep coming out and saying it, there is no agreement in Parliament over this. So they're just going to keep kicking it around, and they're just going to keep, vacillating and not doing any kind of deals whatsoever, because they know they don't need to. Listen,
you honestly, I know you've got a pretty negative view of people in politics and public life.
I haven't actually. That's not true.
Well, the European, I think on the balance of this last chat of ours, I think it's fair to say. But let me just make a point about the European.
I just want them to do their jobs, Alistair. That's all.
Listen, the European Union and people like Tusk, you can criticise them about this, that, and the other. They've actually been very, very clear and pretty consistent the whole way through. Barnier, some time ago, set out all the possible agreements that could be reached. That these guys have to respect their own procedures. They have to respect their own.
But we
laws.
don't have to.
Yes, we do actually. What are you saying, that we don't sort of agree with international systems of international
law? We don't
law?
necessarily have to be jumping and dancing to their tune
That's
at all.
That's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. This is what I'm saying. You do. You're saying that unless they all jump to what you want to do, the European Union, they have got. When we talk, this is why.
Well, you've admitted the negotiations haven't been very well run, so clearly you would agree with me.
Terrible from the British perspective.
Yeah.
The European Union were clear from day one. They said, the first things we have to sort out are, if you like, what's been called the divorce bill, the 39 billion and rising, the reciprocal rights of European Union citizens living in the UK and UK citizens living in the rest of Europe, and the issue of the border. They said that day one. And we have negotiated, the British government wasted months and months and months with those clowns Johnson and Davis in charge. Since then, pursuing these fantasies that we can have our cake and eat it, these trade deals that were going to fall out of the sky. I've said to you before, once we had made the decision to leave, my sense of the European Union was that they'd be incredibly reasonable, which I think they have been.
I don't agree.
Well, we'll disagree on that.
Okay.
But there comes a point where the UK leaving, they become their own vested interest, just as we become our vested interest. That's when negotiations get tough. But I think they've been incredibly reasonable. Here's the thing, Mike. Theresa May, why did they end up with the issue of the backstop? They ended up with the issue of the backstop because of Theresa May's red lines. They came up with that at her request for her. Then what did she do? She went to Parliament.
Well, she then discovers that nobody wants it.
Wait a minute. She went to Parliament and she said, I'm now going to vote against my own plan. They're sitting there thinking, what on earth are we dealing with? These negotiations, she's popped up again yesterday in Sharm el-Sheikh, said these discussions, these negotiations are going on. You talk to any of these other people in the European side, they said they don't know what they're meant to be negotiating because the British government is not producing anything.
Well, all I can say, Alistair, after talking to you for 15 minutes, I don't feel any less confused, I don't feel any less discombobulated or any less negative.
Confusing. It is a very confusing set of affairs. It's a consequence of MPs, in my view, legitimately looking at the detail of Theresa May's deal, deciding that it's a pretty rum deal, deciding that there's no way now doing this Brexit without doing pretty considerable damage to the British economy, British lives, British livelihoods. And meanwhile, I think her leadership is woeful. She is kicking the can down the road. She's basically decided, I don't know whether it's ego, I don't know what it is. She has decided that the national interest, her sacred duty, is to deliver her deal.
Well, at least she's trying to do something that the British people have asked her to do, Alistair. We're going to have to leave it there because people are saying they want to get on and talk about this as well. But thank you very much, Alistair Campbell, former Chief of Communications for Tony Blair. I don't agree with almost everything he says, apart from the fact that Theresa May is making a complete dog's breakfast of it all, and that is true. But at least she's trying to do the will of the people, not what he and some of his cohorts are trying to do, which is to stop the will of the people and to stop us leaving the European Union.